Hello again, and this is another episode of In Conservation With. It's a Zoom interview series which you can find on YouTube under my YouTube channel, the Urban Birder YouTube channel. And it's a series of interviews with the movers and shakers within the conservation world. And we talk about all sorts of things. I mean, tonight we're talking about how to find more birds with Heather Wolf, but other days, we'll be talking to all sorts of people. So you can check the back catalogue on the YouTube channel. And if you are watching this in the future, please like and subscribe. Now, without further ado, I must say hello to my good friend, Heather Wolf. How are you and where are you?
I'm great, David. Thanks. I am in Brooklyn, New York, in the middle of fall migration here.
It must be pretty impressive, the numbers of birds passing through.
Oh, it really is. Fall's my favorite time of year. I mean, the weather's nice and cool and neutral, and it's just so great. I was out there this morning. We have a lot of warblers and a lot of raptors, and it's always so much fun.
I guess you've heard that we in the UK and islands have had a massive fall, like, by our standards, of some of those North American migrants, bobolinks and yellow warblers,
I
magnolia.
have heard, yeah.
It's
That's
incredible.
amazing. So you have you seen the yellow warbler, or what other ones have you had a chance to see over there?
I've personally, me, no, because I'm not a twitcher.
Uh,
I'm a finder. I much rather slog my guts out for years upon years,
Me too.
and,
I like that. Yeah.
possibly find something one day. But if you are willing to travel all the way to, if you're in England, all the way to Wales, because there's been lots of stuff on the west coast of Wales, and also on the Scilly Isles, there's been a few things. But Shetlands in the north, if you want to travel up there and spend £1,000, flying, it's amazing how much they charge for airfares here to go to places like Shetland. You can practically fly to Mexico for that from here.
Oh, wow.
It's ridiculous. So if you want to travel to those areas and also islands, then yeah, you can possibly bump into these birds. But for me, I'm not so excited standing in groups of hundreds of people, and standing chatting idly until something pops out of a bush. I just feel, I mean, I've done it before and I've never really been
Yeah,
excited.
I'm the same way. There's something magical too about experiencing something new on your own. I mean, I love sharing birds with people, of course, and leading walks, but I totally know what you mean. Yeah.
Okay. Well, for those who don't know who Heather is, let me quickly give you a rundown. She's a Brooklyn, as she said earlier, based birder. You're an author, photographer, and an educator. You work with the Cornell Laboratory of Ornithology as a web developer, and you teach birding classes at Brooklyn Botanical Gardens or Botanic Garden. And you give walks and talks for various organizations in New York City and beyond. You love sharing your love of birds. I know that. And you've written two other books. In fact, you've written two books actually now, haven't you?
Two books.
Is
2 books.
Yeah. I'm not stopping, am I? Am I not freezing? So I was a bit worried.
You're good now. Just for a second, you're good.
You've written two books. One of them is Birding at the Bridge, which is all about your local patch, Brooklyn Bridge Park, which I've had the pleasure of visiting a few years ago. And I love you because you are an absolute 150% urban birder. And I love the fact I always look out for your stuff on social media because you're always putting out all your pictures of birds you found, particularly on your patch. So,
I
powerful.
feel the same about you. And of course, David wrote the foreword for Birding at the Bridge. So that was very nice of you to do that. So yeah.
My pleasure. So today, we're going to be talking about how to find more birds, which is an interesting subject. And I think before you actually tell us all about it, I must say that I've read this, and although I'm an experienced birder, you can still learn. You never stop learning. And I love the fact that this book is contemporary, because when you look at a lot of books that teach you about finding birds or how to watch birds, it's all the same thing rehashed over and over again, which of course, some of it's very important. You need to know how to use binoculars and what have you, but it's actually how to find birds, where to look for birds. And I love the fact that you talk about, for example, check the internet, look at social media, which is something that when I looked at that, I suddenly realized I do that all the time. I'm always on Facebook looking at other people's birds, drooling or being inspired by the fact that they found some migrants or whatever in their patch, and I want to go and do the same. Or looking at people's holidays, people go off to Ecuador, what have you, and they've got these wonderful pictures, and you just think, wow, I must get there one day. So I think social media has really come through in a big way when it comes to encouraging people to get involved in birds.
I mean, I love the birding community on social media. I mean, I love that I could just go there and just see beautiful photos and stories and about urban birding or travels, or it is great, except for the exact reasons that you mentioned.
And also you get people who aren't birders putting up stuff. And I saw something on Twitter the other day, and it was this amazing piece of footage. It was actually a webcam of a peregrine nest. I don't know if you've seen this, Heather, and a wood pigeon, so it's over in Britain or Europe somewhere, lands on the ledge and then strolls into the nest, and there's a peregrine sitting on the nest, and the peregrine's like, what? And then suddenly clicks and then grabs the pigeon by the wing and then takes it outside and starts dealing with it. I think the pigeon managed to escape eventually, but I mean, what a pigeon brain, eh?
Oh my gosh, I have to look that up. That sounds like an amazing story.
But it's on my Twitter feed, so you can scroll down and look at that.
But you're right. Just on another point on social media, like you said, it's not only birders posting photos of birds, so just people that encountering things in their day to day. So it's really fun.
And often birds are discovered on social media, aren't they? Because people put up pictures and say, I've seen this.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's get introduced and acquainted to your book, Find More Birds. And don't forget, everyone, get your messages over to me, your direct messages as to why you'd want to win a copy of Find More Birds.
Excellent. So I am going to start up my presentation here. And I'm starting it with a bird I saw in the UK because I was just so inspired by the cover of David's book, How to Be an Urban Birder. And it has like the best cover ever with a jackdaw eating French fries. And I was so envious of this. And I had never seen a jackdaw. So when I first went to London this past December, I had to get a photo of a jackdaw. And there it is in Richmond Park in London. And this photo is in the book. So thank you, David, for that inspiration. I love this bird. So Find More Birds, that's my new book. And what is it about? It's really about more than just finding birds. I mean, that is a big thing, but a lot of it too is about experiencing, witnessing really cool behaviors of birds, these could be very common birds that you see every day. You could see courtship and drama, territorial defense, eating, foraging behaviors, really interesting stuff. So it's more about the total experience of nature and then connecting on a very deep level with nature, because the more time you spend out there looking at birds, the more you're going to start noticing other things like the plants, the insects, the mammals, the weather. I mean, you're really connecting with nature on a level that I never thought was possible. And it gets closer and closer every day. And also there's the aspect of contributing to like citizen science, or contributing, as we talked about, social media, sharing your sightings on social media. Sorry, some Brooklyn horns. And everyone could be a part of making birding exciting for everyone, accessible for everyone, and playing a part, in conservation. So today's topics, I'm going to talk for about 15 or 20 minutes. So I'm going to talk about my favorite tips from the book. So these are like what I think, or what I really love them all. There are 111. There were more, but we had to cut them because there were just so many. But I have some ones that I really, really love. I'm going to talk to you about those. And then I'm going to mention the top 3 tips that are the essentials that a lot of us already are using and know about, but I just want to make sure that, we know about those as well. And then my last thing I'm going to talk about are just a few of the adventures that I went on during the making of Find More Birds. So let's get started. So my favorite tips from the book, of course, pick a patch. So what is a patch? Patch is a pretty common term in the birding community in the UK, but in the States, we don't use it as much, but I do. And patch is someplace that you bird most days of the week. It's usually close to home, and it's a location where you're experiencing different things every day, different birds, different behaviors, all of those things I mentioned. So picking a patch is an awesome way to not only find surprises that you never thought you would see, just like David and I have both seen amazing things in our patches, but also seeing just really cool behaviors. So even with common birds, I mentioned, like, it looks like a turkey, but it's really a rock pigeon. I just watched a pigeon doing some stretching and I got this photo. It's I never knew that they could arrange their wings like this, so that was really cool. But also you see some rare birds a lot of times because you're so tuned into a patch that you really notice something different, right? So one of the biggest surprises was in 2019 when I found a painted bunting. And this is a juvenile male painted bunting. You could see it's got a lot of green and yellow, and super rare for this area in Brooklyn. I think at least 100 birders came to twitch it and take photos, and the bird eventually moved over to another location, but everybody followed it over there. Of course, it was still in the park, but it moved to a different habitat with seeds. But the way I found this bird was by changing my route. So one of the tips in the book is to do this, because a lot of times when we go out for a walk or a stroll, or we're visiting the same locations in our local park or neighborhood over and over again. But if you take a different route, you might discover a different habitat, which could mean a different bird. You never know what's around the corner. So that's what I did. So there was this, I called it the secret path at my patch in Brooklyn Bridge Park. And I was on this path with my friend Bob, and we saw something bright yellow and green fly by, but we had to go to brunch, so we did that. And then I came back later, and that is when I found the painted bunting, and it was eating the seeds on this native plant called switchgrass or panicum, and it stayed for 2 months because of the seed availability there. So definitely change your route, take a different turn, and you never know what you might see. So in my patch, when I started, I was at 0, and now I've seen 184 species in Brooklyn Bridge Park, my patch. I still cannot believe it. And you'll notice this number 184, the Forster's tern, was just a few days ago. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how I managed to get that species on my list in a few minutes. But I didn't have enough room to show the whole list. This is not the whole list, but 184. I didn't think I could hit 200, but some of my colleagues think I can. So they're inspiring me to possibly get 200. Some low-hanging fruit might be, say, monk parakeets might fly by, or an owl, which I don't have yet. I'm really looking during the winter for owls, like a northern saw-whet owl. But I have high hopes for that, and I'm going to edge closer and closer, and we will see how far I get. Keeping a list. So I showed you that's my life list for the whole park for my patch. But even just keeping a list when you're out. So I work at ebird.org. I'm a web developer, and we offer a lot of tools for finding where birds are, hotspots, and where to find certain species. But we're also a citizen science project, and people enter their lists into our database. And that informs a lot of conservation efforts, because our data scientists can model that data and identify important bird areas or places where birds are declining. But generally, if you're out, whether you use eBird to keep a list or keep it in a notebook, what's cool about it is, say you get, at least for me, when I get 19 species, I want to get to 20. When I get to 30, 35, I might think about 40, but I think one day I had 49 species on my list for the day, and I really wanted a 50th. So I used one of the tips that is in the book, which is to eke birds out of the sky. So keeping a list really motivated me to do this. And I started scanning, beyond the buildings. So I focused my binoculars on the buildings above the park. And then I saw a little speck up there, took a picture, and got a horrible photo of this beautiful bird, a bald eagle. So one of the things I mentioned in the book is that you can combine these tips to make bird finding recipes. So in this case, I was keeping a list. I was at 49, so I really wanted to get a 50th. So I was really motivated to get one more bird, to find one more bird. I used tip 103 to eke birds out of the sky. It's also called use the reach of your binoculars. So whether you focus on buildings in the distance or a plane in the sky, that's going to help you get that focus far into the sky, and you might see birds you would not see with the naked eye, usually raptors, right? So I used that, and then what did I do? Whoops, I kind of went ahead, but this last one was I took a bad photo because I thought I saw a raptor and I wasn't sure, but I took a photo, zoomed in, and there it was, a bald eagle. So you can see with a lot of these tips, you'll be using various tips to find more birds. Whoops. Yeah, so number 50 is to take photos, even bad ones. It doesn't matter. Bird photography is very difficult, challenging. I take so many bad photos, but a lot of these bad photos have allowed me to find more birds. One of my favorite ones that is in the book is these great cormorants. So I saw some birds. They looked a little different flying up the East River, kind of looked like Canada geese, but something struck me as different. So I just took some photos, even though I knew they were going to be really bad. When I looked at the photos, these were great cormorants, which are common in the UK, but not common here in Brooklyn, maybe more out, in the near Jamaica Bay and things, Breezy Point, Queens, but not as inland as I am. So I got a new one for the list by taking a bad photo. Another example is I was photographing bald eagles a little up the Hudson River, and I was going through deleting all the photos. But luckily, I didn't even know when I took this that the bald eagle was chasing a peregrine falcon that has prey in its talons. So when I got home and I was looking at my photos, I found two more birds. I can't identify the one in the talons, probably a pigeon, I'm not sure. But you could just see how that can help you. So another one of my top tips is to head out after a storm. As you know, storm birding is a big thing. It's very important to be safe, but it's always a good idea, like after a storm, to go out and see what may have blown in, especially if you're along the coast, because a lot of pelagic birds that are normally out at sea can come in closer. For flamingos, I do mention a large pink bird in my book, and I mention how it's really difficult to find flamingos even in Florida. But guess what? Right now, it's not. Because of Hurricane Idalia, we have a lot of American flamingos showing up on our side of the more north, so even in Pennsylvania. So I'm definitely keeping an eye out for flamingos. I'm scanning the water and overhead, and so it's very exciting, and this is all because of a storm. And I did see this out my window. So I was like, I noted I had a photo that was named Flamingo. I'm like, where? And this was a giant floating flamingo heading up the East River for some promotional event. Similar to heading out after a storm, going for a walk in the rain is one of my favorite things. I lead a lot of bird walks, and I lead them rain or shine, because so many times, if in the past we have canceled a walk and then it's a beautiful day, or I go out anyway and see some amazing things. So I mentioned so for example, like the thing about rain is a lot of puddles are going to develop too after rain or after a storm. So you can see birds bathing, you can see them drinking. This little mud puddle has been in my patch for about 2 years. So it dries up when it's warm and then it fills up with water after a rain. And here we have American robins and European starlings visiting it. So I love that. Also, you can really see some cool behaviors. This is the first and only time I've seen an American robin catching raindrops on its tongue. This is a young one. So now I showed you earlier, my Forster's Tern was the latest addition to my patch list. And that happened, some of you may have heard about the Brooklyn floods. It was about a week ago. I did venture out. It was fine here, right in my patch. So it was a light rain and I went out and I saw a Forster's Tern flying. I didn't even have binoculars. I think I went out for a coffee and said, oh, I'll just check. And the Forster's Tern was flying over my head. So rain and storms are definitely great for finding more birds. So top tips. These are tips. Most of these we all know and love. I mean, my number one tip in the book is to follow sounds. And you don't have to know what bird is making the sound. Whatever it is, a chatter, a song, rustling in the leaves, or anything, it's good to follow it because you can find some very interesting things. I also love following the sounds of crows, especially here in an urban environment. That often means there's some drama, that crows are chasing a red-tailed hawk or trying to get it out of their territory or something. So following sounds is a great way to find birds. This is a great bird, and this is a bird that forages in the leaf litter. So I've played this song for a lot of people, and they say, I've heard that, but I've never seen it. And it's because it's well hidden. It forages in the leaf litter, which is one of my favorite places to find more birds. But I'm going to play the song for you now. Beautiful, recognizable song. And then this is an American kestrel, and it's probably sounds similar to the kestrels you have over in the UK, for those of you that are there. It's kind of like a cackling laugh. I was walking into my apartment about a week ago and I heard that sound, and I looked around and there were two kestrels in the container terminal right outside my window. So sound is definitely a great cue to, and it also makes you more aware, and you tune in to sounds that are even really far away. Once you start listening more closely, you're going to be shocked at some of the things that you can hear and detect. My number 2 tip is to look for movement. Of course, that's a big one. So you look for movement in the leaf litter, on the lawn, in the trees, in the sky, everywhere. I also love to look at tree trunks, and this is a brown creeper. It's the time of the season. So when you look at tree trunks, you can find obviously woodpeckers, but creepers, nuthatches. I've even seen house sparrows here creeping up trees. So there's all sorts of aspects of the landscape where you should look for movement. One of the most difficult is in, dense shrubs, and it can be frustrating to try to get a good look at a bird. So in that kind of situation. So I just want to show you what it looks like and what to look for on these gentle tugs on shrubs and leaves and branches. So as you can see, initially the view of that common yellowthroat, that's a female common yellowthroat, it was hard to see. But I mentioned don't lose hope if it flies away, which is another tip in the book, because it oftentimes, if it just makes a short hop, it's probably very close by. And if you track it in flight, this is something you can practice with common birds. Just lock on the bird, see where it flies. And then oftentimes you can get an amazing look. And that's how I got those photos. So I tracked it, waited, and then it appeared in all its glory. The sky, this is a great place to look for birds. I got a red-tailed hawk coming in for a landing. And this is a huge thing that David always says is to look up. So it's very important to do that. I tend to forget. So what I love to do is every time I hear a plane, I look up. So that's like a cue. And by doing that, it reminds me to look up. Also shadows. If you see shadows on the ground, look up. I have a great picture of shadows in the book that took me a while to get, but it was fun. So movement is awesome. Also related to what I mentioned before with rain, checking freshwater sources is a huge one for me. I love that. And it's the number 3 tip. This is a white-throated sparrow that once again is in a little puddle that happened after a rain or a sprinkler session. So you want to look for these places. Even the shallowest of puddles are places where birds could take a drink. It looks like this gray catbird is eating, but it's actually taking a sip of water here. So anytime you see tiny pockets of water, take a step back, watch from afar, and you could see birds like this beautiful cedar waxwing, which it's tough to see this bird. Usually they're really high in trees, but I got lucky and checked the local playground for some shallow water. It's a water playground. And so a lot of puddles get generated, and the cedar waxwing showed up there. Another thing is when it snows or it freezes, the freshwater sources for birds freeze up as well. So it's a little bit sad, of course, but interesting that you could find the birds trying to find other sources of water. This is a gray catbird licking the droplets off a banister. And one of my favorite photos in the book, I don't have it in the presentation, but it's of American robins lined up on a bench waiting for snow and ice to melt so that they can take a drink. The book's divided into sections, like looking for clues. One of them is looking at birds' favorite restaurants. So this is their habitats or where they like to eat. I mentioned leaf litter. There's lots of insects, arthropods under the leaf litter. This warbler, the ovenbird, loves to hunt in the leaf litter. As you can see here, it's finding a lot of snacks. It's just gobbling down all of this food to fuel its migration. These birds are hungry. Warblers are constantly eating. And another misconception is that you have to be a morning person to bird, but you can find birds during migration all day long because they're fattening up for the migration journey. Mud is another great restaurant.
Mud, glorious mud, nothing quite like it for cooling the blood. So follow me, follow.
So that's a killdeer foraging crazily in mud, just getting lots of great protein. Another section in the book is looking for the clues that birds leave. If you see feathers on the ground strewn about like this, chances are there's a raptor in your neighborhood. So if you see the feathers falling, you definitely want to look up. That's a good sign also to look up. But yeah, so it's a great way to know that raptors are in your neighborhood. I found that I saw a white spot in the distance on a lawn, and I walked up to it, and this is what I found: a bunch of feathers, likely pigeon feathers that were the result of probably a red-tailed hawk, because these birds frequent that park quite a bit. So looking for clues is a great way to find more birds. And I just want to touch on, before I wrap up, a few of the adventures that I went on, because I didn't just include photos and stories from Brooklyn or New York City. I did travel a bit, and I wanted some pictures of swifts. So the swifts over here, chimney swifts and Vox's swifts and other swifts, they roost in chimneys. So I had heard about the Vox's swifts out at Chapman School in Portland, Oregon. This is a chimney swift, which is in New York City. So I was used to seeing these. But when I went to Portland, this was the scene that I got. Now, what was great was that a lot of people from the community, not really birders, just families, were picnicking and watching this. And right around sunset, the birds congregate. And then as it gets darker, they start to enter the chimney. As you see, they're in this kind of cyclone formation. And they're going to be, if you watch closely there, it's a little dark, but they're entering the chimney. So that was really, really fun to see. There they go. They're just going in. There were about 6,000 of them. Another fun experience was looking for acorn woodpeckers. I heard these woodpeckers create granaries where they store their acorns in trees. Usually it's like this. And I used eBird to find a location where they were. And I heard some knocking around the corner, kind of by the restrooms. And I looked around the corner, and there was an acorn woodpecker that had created a granary under the awning of the restroom building. So you never know what you're going to see. That was a real treat. And the last adventure I'm going to mention is scanning the airport runways is interesting, especially if you're at the airport, you're killing time, you're people watching, but you can also do bird watching. So I did go out to Jacksonville Airport. There was a plane spotting place that you could look at, which I'd never been to. I saw this mockingbird. And while I was there, I heard something that sounded like a quail coming from the field below. So I let Merlin listen. An app from Cornell Lab of Ornithology is Merlin Bird ID. If you don't have it, you'll want to download it. It's free. It's great. We have Sound ID on it. So I let Merlin listen, and there was a northern bobwhite behind me. So just by being out there in this dusty parking lot trying to get a photo of birds, at the airport, I got a bobwhite. And so this is at Savannah Hilton Head Airport. And a lot of times airports, to scare away birds, because they don't want a lot of birds around, they'll put fake birds up. So if you look down here, I thought, oh, is that a fake raptor? What is that? But I looked at my photos, and the bird's head moved. So I know it was a real bird. And that was a red-tailed hawk at the Savannah Hilton Head Airport. I did tell security before I was photographing and taking my binoculars that I was going to be doing this, because you might want to alert security, especially if you have binoculars or cameras. So that's the presentation, and I'm really psyched that people are loving this book. And one of my favorite quotes is from Joan Strassman, the author of Slow Birding, that she said that it could be a guide for life. And it really, that is so awesome that people are really enjoying it, and that she wrote that. So it's more than just finding birds. It's about the experience and connecting with nature. So we're going to go to Q&A now, but definitely keep in touch. I'm at brooklynbridgebirds.com. You can connect to me on social media. At that link, you'll see all the channels, and I'll hand it over to David.
Well, Heather, as ever, I'm blown away with what you do, and that book looks like so much fun in terms of you getting out there and doing stuff and researching it. A few points resonated with me. Lastly, for example, or should I say, I'm going backwards, but the airport thing, I've always, whenever I land at an airport, I'm always trying to see what the first bird I will see is going to be. Normally it's a pigeon or a crow, but I remember, I think, landing in Cancun and seeing a whole bunch of, there must have been boat-tailed or great-tailed grackles. So that was really, that's something I always try and do. And the other thing I was sort of struck by, you talking about eBird lists. I use eBird quite a lot now. I think there used to be a bit of an issue with eBird in terms of people using it in the UK, because sometimes the names were Americanized. I think some people were thinking, oh, I don't want to use it anymore. But actually, that seems to be corrected now, and it's fine now. And I use it quite a lot. And I think, for me, it's not even so much seeing numbers of birds. I'm more excited by the fact that it lists certain species as infrequent or never seen before. And I just hope after the end of my list, that I have at least one bird that's at least infrequent. That for me is my goal.
That's a great goal. I love that.
I remember going to a spot, I live in Extremadura in southwest Spain. I remember going to a spot, a castle, that no one ever goes to. So I went there, and everything I saw, even the starlings, had never been reported before. And I was like, yes, I'm an explorer.
I love it. I love it.
So that was great. And also taking photos. I totally agree with you. I say to people, get that lens cap off. What are you waiting for? Because I take pictures regardless of the weather conditions, regardless of light, and regardless of species as well, because I think it's such good practice just to keep taking photographs. And as you say, most of them would be terrible, but it doesn't matter because they're your photos. It's no competition here. It's just basically, you know, you're recording stuff. And then eventually you kind of learn about light organically, at least I did anyway. And you learn about how far, you know, birds are, and is it worth taking a photograph sometimes if a little dot in the bush when it's a half a mile away or half a kilometer away or whatever, you need to get a bit closer sometimes. But there comes a point when you got taking pictures of starlings and house sparrows to the T, and then one day something rare shows up, but you already trained yourself, you're ready, you know, and you can take a good picture because you've already practiced on 1,000 pigeons and starlings and stuff like that. So I think it's so important to encourage people to take pictures.
That's such a great point. I like practicing on the common birds. I love that.
Yeah, I do that all the time. I mean, today I was out birding and I was taking pictures of, well, over here, carrion crows, which are quite common, and robins and dunnocks. And the other thing I wanted to comment about was rain. I too love rain. I think it's incredible to go out birding in the rain, and I've led a couple of walks myself in the rain. And one time it's absolutely peeing down with rain, and I was in my local patch, Wormwood Scrubs in West London, and I thought no one would turn up, but 12 people did. So we walked in the rain, and we had amazing views of a common cuckoo, which in London on migration in spring is not a common sight, and it was actually flying in from the south, battling its way north. And that was incredible to watch, you know. And it's one of those things that, you know, that if you're in the rain, you see things that other people don't because other people aren't there. And plus, when you're out in the rain, there comes a point when it stops raining. And when it stops raining, everything comes out. But you're in.
I know, it's my favorite.
Yeah, you're right there. You're in amongst it. You know, you're not at home thinking, "Oh, stop now, I'm going to come." You know, you're late then. You need to be actually there when it's all happening. And I remember another time being in Serbia. I was leading the tour and it's pouring with rain. And I remember, again, it was spring migration. And again, it involved common cuckoos. And we're out in the country actually, and there was a fence. And on this fence, separated maybe 3 feet between each bird, there must have been about 15 cuckoos just sitting on a fence.
Oh my gosh.
You would never see that normally. So I thought it was amazing. So I think it's really good. Thank you very much for actually being very kind of lateral about it, thinking outside the box in terms of how people can actually see birds, you know, because I think people think that they need to be in a special place. I mean, for example, one question for you is, people say to me sometimes, why am I going birding in an urban park? There's loads of people. What's the point? What would you say to people?
I would say, and you know this, urban birding is the best birding because the habitats are concentrated. And a lot of times, especially in newer parks or even older parks, there's low shrubs, you know, along the paths. You're going to get amazing views of birds, better than you would out in the middle of a giant forest where you're cranking your neck. I mean, as you can see these photos, a lot of them that I included, they're very close up. I mean, some of these birds are at my feet, you know, they're just too close. I have to back up. So urban birding, it's always a surprise. And I think it's so fun to see the excitement and surprise on people's faces when they experience that.
Exactly, because, you know, I'll take people out. In fact, this weekend I'm taking people out in London, and I am certain that they'll be like, geez, I didn't realize I can see this here, or whatever. You know, it's just incredible the amount of birds you can see. One of the chapters in your book is about dressing, what to wear. Talk us through that. What advice?
Yeah, a lot of people say it doesn't matter, but I tell the story in the book of a friend and I. We were terrified of ticks, you know, so there's Lyme disease and these little things. If you're wearing dark clothes, you can't see the ticks. So they could burrow into your skin and cause some problems. So we were new to birding. So we went out and we had this grand idea to wear white jumpsuits, completely white jumpsuits. And we had been birding at this place before. It was called Naval Live Oaks in Florida. And we saw a lot of birds. So now we arrive in our white jumpsuits. We don't see any birds. because I think we had scared them all away because the birds could see that we were coming from a mile away. So by the time we got to them, they were nowhere to be found. But we took the ticks off, no problem. We could easily see them, but we never wore those jumpsuits again.
Sounds like a wise thing. But do you think, I mean, I always say to people, you don't need to wear green. You know, you can wear other colors. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, in practice.
I mean, yeah, it doesn't matter too much, just nothing gleaming. And even if, I've seen, even if you're wearing white, sometimes you can see birds. I like brown anyway. I like brown and earth tones. Those are my colors. So yeah, I would say these subdued colors, maybe not neon, just blending in. Think of how the birds blend in with the landscape. If you can blend in a little bit, with the landscape, that's going to help a little bit.
One thing I noticed about birding in America, and I've said this to a few people, including when I came over to America in May this year, I spent a month doing various festivals. When I go birding with Americans, and also in Spain as well, people talk very loudly. And I'm wondering, hey, why are you talking so loud? The birds are going to go. But invariably, the birds don't.
It's so funny you said that, because when I lead walks, I'm not very quiet. I talk. And I think maybe more so in an urban environment. In an urban environment, the birds are used to sound anyway, so I don't think it matters as much. But if I was in a very quiet, tranquil forest, usually I'm quiet. Like I know when I went to South America, we were looking at owls. I was trying to be very quiet until my phone went off. But yeah, I mean, I think it really varies based on the environment you're in.
One tip I think when it comes to phones is I have a duck quacking. So, regardless of where I am, the phone rings, the duck's quacking, no one gets alarmed, no natural.
That's a good idea. I'm going to do that, change that immediately.
Natural sounds, then you don't really scare things off so much. Talk about natural stuff. I mean, when you're out, you're talking about ticks. I mean, it seems that ticks are becoming more of a thing now. I mean, I got bitten by a tick in Wales. I was surprised to come home and find a tick embedded in my leg, and it's the first time in my life in England, or Wales is Great Britain, in the UK, to get such a thing. And in the US, I was petrified because I was in Philadelphia, I was in Ohio, and I was warned constantly about ticks. And actually, I did find a tick on my body on one occasion. Do you think there's something that's increasing due to, the climatic changes we're going through and stuff, or?
It's quite possible. I really don't know the answer to that, but we've always had ticks here, like in Florida, a lot in New York, but it does seem like the concern is increasing. And it may just be that there's more carriers of Lyme disease, or Lyme disease, more people are getting Lyme disease. So it's more of a concern, but I don't know if climate change is affecting them, but chances are, yes, it's affecting pretty much every creature, including us. So,
yeah. So this year, where have you been birding? Because I've corresponded with you a few times, but I've not actually had the online face-to-face with you. Where have you been this year? What have you been seeing?
Right. So normally I take like one big trip a year, but this year I took two big trips. I went to Costa Rica with my friend and a bird guide. His name is Gabriel Willow, and he leads a lot of tours here in New York City. And he led a tour to Costa Rica. I had never been there. So that was amazing. And I did manage to squeeze into the deadline a picture of the resplendent quetzal here. So yeah, I mean, Costa Rica is amazing just because it's small, so everything's kind of packed in. So you see a lot of birds, like the biodiversity is amazing there. Volcano hummingbirds, all sorts of things. And then I couldn't resist my birding mentors, Bob and Lucy Duncan, who the first book is dedicated to. They live in Florida, and they were going to Cuba. So I had to go with them. So I'd always wanted to go to Cuba. And there is the smallest bird in the world, the bee hummingbird. So yeah, so that's where I've been so far this year.
I learned the other day that even though the bee hummingbird is the smallest bird in the world, because it's tiny, it doesn't lay the smallest egg, apparently.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Who does? Do you know?
Yeah, the Vervian hummingbird, which is found certainly in Jamaica and maybe a couple of other places in the Caribbean, apparently its egg is smaller than a bee hummingbird, even though it's slightly bigger than a bee hummingbird.
That's fascinating. What a job to measure those tiny eggs. They're the size of like Tic Tacs or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely tiny. So yeah, it's really quite interesting. I mean, do you think that in the US anyway is the kind of, especially since the pandemic at its height, do you think that urban birding has really increased across the states and people's interest has increased?
So much so. I mean, even in my patch, there's all day, there's so many people out there. It's great to see people getting involved. It really, people were itching to get outside during the pandemic, and birding offered the perfect way to do that, and to, maintain social distance and all of that. So a definite yes.
And how did you find birding in the UK compared to the US?
Oh my gosh. Well, I was in London. I loved it. I mean, I was staying close to the Thames in Putney, and so I would walk along the Thames, and I had seen a European robin once before in Paris, had a horrible view. I could barely even claim that I saw it. So on the Thames, the European robins were just coming right up to me. There's a picture of one in the book. Amazing. And then I walked along to the World Wetland Center, the London one, and just with the bird blinds and that they offer and the field guides and scopes, it was unbelievable. And I think I will be going back this December, and I cannot wait.
Yeah, it's interesting. I see a discernible difference between birding in the US and birding in the UK. I think that on average, more US birders are much more attuned to sound. I'm out with people and they can hear all these things going on, and I can't hear a bloody thing compared to the UK. But I'm wondering whether that's because you probably have more woodland than we do in the UK. And for me, being brought up in the city, I was brought up in London. It's been, I've basically done a lot of my birding in open vistas. But when I go to the US and also to South America, it's almost more about what you hear as opposed to what you see. Do you think that's
Right? Yeah, I mean, I do notice that, like in the woods and stuff, a lot of times, yeah, you'll just hear things, and people that are really good at sound, I'm not an expert in that, but people say, oh, this species, this species, this species. It's like, but I want to see it. And that's when especially for beginning birders, that can be frustrating, but that is how it is. And in my patch too, I'll often hear things that I don't see, and I'm okay with that. But yeah, I don't know, like, why that is with London. I mean, I mentioned the kestrel. Do kestrels cackle like that over there? Do you hear them?
Yeah, they do that kick, but it's a different pitch.
Okay.
To kestrel, it's a bit lower, I think. Not as kind of, your kestrel's a little bit more squeaky. But having said that, despite the fact your kestrel is smaller than our kestrel, your kestrel is by far the most voracious out of the two. I mean, I've seen American kestrels taking down swifts. I remember being in Peru and watching, not swift, swallows, watching an American kestrel in front of me just take this blue and white swallow, bam, right in front of me. And I've never seen a European or common kestrel do anything like that ever, because they tend
do they hunt mostly small mammals over there? Or?
Yeah, they do. Okay. And I've seen them kind of chasing after sparrows and things, but they're nothing like the accipiters, like the sparrowhawks or I suppose your coopers and sharp-shinned. They're much slower and not as accomplished, I think.
Yeah, they are fierce. Yes. But yeah, I mean, so would you say that in the UK that follow sound might not be a top tip, or?
No, I think it is. I mean, for example, I was out this morning. I'm hearing all sorts of calls, and a lot of them are birds like dunnocks, or robins, or crows, carrying crows. And I do use eBird actually. Not eBird, sorry, Merlin.
Merlin. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Me too. Yeah.
It's interesting because I've only got into Merlin this year. And it's interesting because Merlin, I think, is a very good guide, but it must be used as a guide, because some people I've noted, they kind of see what Merlin's heard and that's it. it's gone on the list, even though they haven't heard it.
Right. It's a suggestion. So you need extra verification. You want to make sure. Yeah. Good point.
Yeah, so I kind of use it just out of interest. And I heard, well, on the Merlin app, there were things that it mentioned, which I didn't hear at all. But then I thought, well, it's possible that a gold crest was calling, but I never heard it. Then it's possible that, another finch like, siskin, our European siskin might have flown over. I didn't hear it. So I think it's good to use in conjunction with, your actual site. But when you're taking new people out, often people ask you, what do I need to get in order to start birding? What would you suggest?
Right. Well, I mean, I think to start birding, you don't need much. I mean, I do recommend a paper field guide, just, of the birds of the area, like a book of the birds of, say, London or New York City. There's a lot of region specific bird guides, because not only can you bring that out to the field, but at home you can put it on the coffee table and kind of just thumb through it and get used to seeing and reading about the birds. Out in the field, a lot of people say, you don't need binoculars. You don't. You can see birds without binoculars. But if you have binoculars, your connection with nature and your experience is really going to be different, on a different level. I don't know if these are available in the UK, but there are some very affordable binoculars that I mention in my book. I see this all the time, that people say, oh, these binoculars are hundreds, thousands of dollars. How could I ever afford this? But I don't get any commission from this, but Bushnell Falcon 7x35s are $30. So you can get them on Amazon. So I would highly recommend binoculars. And if you're looking through binoculars and it's out of focus, look up something called secondary focus, because I've met so many people that have their binoculars and they're kind of like putting up with the fact that they're not seeing anything in focus. But we don't know about secondary focus. You don't think you have to read the manual, and you don't necessarily. It's usually on the barrel, like a secondary focus is usually on the barrel or a pull out section. So yeah, I would highly recommend field guide binoculars.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't call it secondary focus here, actually, because I wasn't sure what
like diopter, or no,
well, that's the official name. Yeah, the diopters. Yeah, it's all about calibrating your eyes, because everyone's got a dominant eye, and also you've got to make sure with both eyes, because people often pick up binoculars thinking they can just use them like straight away.
Exactly.
And you can't, because you need to have them focused and sort of adjusted to your eyes. And often people make the mistake thinking that looking through a pair of binoculars, you should be seeing an inverted 8 like you would do on the James Bond movies, instead of seeing a circle, and it's things like that. And I remember, and also some people, I remember a woman came on one of my tours once, and her binoculars were like pre-war. I mean, they were like really old. And I said, do you want to borrow one of my, I've got a spare pair of Leica binoculars here, $1,500.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And she said, no, I'm happy with mine, thank you. And I remember looking through hers, and it was like looking through 2 toilet tubes with yellow tint. And I was thinking, how can you see anything? But I guess,
Well, yeah, I mean, this is the thing too. So one thing I do want to mention that's also in the book are the specs are important. So you need, those small glasses. You want to make the experience enjoyable. So usually 7x35mm, 8x42, or 10x42. Those are some common ones. So make sure you get one with the right specs for birding. Otherwise, it's going to be a frustrating and not optimal experience. One more thing about binoculars, David and I wear glasses. If you don't wear glasses, pull out on the barrels by the eyes where you put your eyes. Usually they screw out. So you want to screw out. That's called the eye relief, because if you don't, you'll probably see a lot of like black spots or black on the sides when you're looking through.
Yeah, that is dead true. But you know what? Sometimes when I'm in a jungle, I actually have mine in and no glasses, because then I kind of see more. A wider vision.
But anyway, really?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, in the main, you're totally right. So look, it's fall, it's autumn, and it's not over yet. What predictions have you got for your patch?
Oh gosh.
In October, any predictions?
Well, I'm really hoping for brown pelicans because they're being seen a lot out at Coney Island. They've been heading up north further and further due to climate change and warming ocean temperatures. So I really am hoping for that. And also I really want the flamingo. So fingers crossed. It's not out of the realm of possibility. So as you say, like feel the force.
Beautiful, and look up for that flamingo. You might find one flying over your head.
Yes.
If you could be anywhere on this planet, Heather, right now, where would you be?
Oh, that's so difficult. I don't know. I mean, I love where I am right now in Brooklyn, but I will say I'm going to Oaxaca, Mexico next year. So I've never been there, but I have a feeling I'm really going to like it. So I can't wait to get there. So I'm going to say I would love to be in Oaxaca, Mexico right now.
Okay, I know you've been on before. For those who don't realize, if you look back in the catalogue of In Conservation with, Heather was on with her, I think it was your last book, wasn't it? Your first
Yeah.
book. It was like 2-3 years ago. And that's when I got you to juggle, because she's also a juggler. But we won't do this, well, I won't embarrass you this time. But I may have asked you for your favorite bird. So I'm going to ask you again, in case it's changed. What is your favorite bird?
It's the white-throated sparrow, and it was one I showed in the presentation, and I think I messed it up last time because I said, "Oh, this is my favorite bird," but I held my tongue this time till the end. So white-throated sparrow, and the reason is because it's here during the winter. It's got the little splash of yellow, and it sings during the winter, so it gets me through a lot of cold winter days.
Fantastic. Well, just to remind everyone, there's more In Conservation Withs coming up. We've got conversations with real hardcore conservationists even. For example, a gentleman called Mark Avery next week will be talking about his take on the state of the conservation efforts in the UK, and he doesn't mince of his words. I've asked Chris Packham to come. He hasn't responded yet, but you never know, we might get him as well. And for those who don't know who he is, he's one of the main sort of shining lights in conservation in the UK. And also we've got a ton of people talking about a ton of different things, ranging from swifts through to, I don't know, all sorts of things. So just check it out on the urbanbirderworld.com website. There's a whole list of people. I mean, there's one person talking about the walking the Camino way. But anyway, so there's all that coming up on In Conservation With. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe. And also, if you're here now as a Zoomer, you have your last chance to direct message me with a reason for having a free copy of Find More Birds by Heather Wolf. You'll have a reason, and we'll choose that in the next section, which is a Q&A, which you can view if you become a member of the Urban Birder World community. So, Heather, thank you so much for sparing your afternoon to be with us today.
Thank you, David, and everyone for attending.
I wish you luck with the book, and thank you, Zoomers, as well. And don't forget, keep looking up.